Good day to everybody. This video shows my observation and experience during my 30-day trial of Dorico coming from Finale. Bit of a background on what I do. I'm an orchestrator, a bass player, and educator, and I have been using Finale for roughly 17 years now. I've used Finale to write full orchestra arrangements, big band music, rhythm section transcription, musicals, and lecture materials for my students. So yeah, I pretty much know my way around Finale up to the point where I could do what I need to do in as efficient as possible as I can with the knowledge that I have. But by no means I'm no expert in contemporary notation down to the programming level of Finale. I still rely on YouTube videos, Finale forum, and friends and colleagues for some help in stuff that I don't know how to write in Finale. I decided to try Dorico because I've been seeing a lot of YouTube videos on some features added to version 3, particularly the condense feature. After seeing that video, I got curious and went on to watch a lot more videos. And aside from that, one of my orchestration students is using Dorico and he turns up really clean scores for his assignments. That being said, let's get on with the video. In Dorico, you have to think of players or section of musicians rather than instruments. So once you click on a new project, you get to the setup mode here, where it will ask you to add a solo player, a section player, or an ensemble. Let's say I'll be adding a flute player, a vocalist, a pianist again, and a string section. Click a solo player, so add a solo player. If you notice here, you have an empty-handed player. So now you have to give that player an instrument. So his instrument would be flute. So you now have flute. So now we have given the empty-handed player an instrument. So now he's using the flute. So let's try and add the piano. So a voice. So that again is a solo player. So voice and the piano. And for the rest of the string section, we'll get it down to a cello. I can do this by clicking add and sum instead of adding section players because that would take time adding each instrument. So what I could do is just click on the add and sum button down here. Look for strings. Yeah, string section. And then add the ensemble, and then just delete the double bass because I don't need a double bass. So delete player and part layouts. I'll get to layouts later. Okay, so at this point I got confused between the player and the layout pane. So this is a player's section and this is the layout section. At first I was a bit confused what they are, and then I figured out that the player section is for setting up what instruments you need. And the layout section is the actual score and parts available for printing or for preparation. Once I got that one figured out, there's this one big thing that's new to me, which was flows down here. The way I understand flows is that they are different pieces of music within the project. So for example, you have a project that has 4 movements where each movement is contained within a flow. Or in my case, I assigned each exercise of the lecture material I created to a flow. So you can add multiple flows. You could actually have flow 1, or the way I think of it is the first music would have all the instruments. The second music would have only, let's say, just the flute and voice. So flow 1 would look different than flow 2. So something like that. Having grasped this concept of players and layouts, the good thing about it is that you can assign multiple instruments to one player. So let's say the flute player is doubling a piccolo. I can add that piccolo to that player by clicking the plus sign and add the piccolo. So you could see under here, that player now has flute and piccolo. Uh, this then comes into play when creating parts for that particular player. So remember, the layout is a part. So in this case, a part will this then comes into play when creating the parts for that particular player. As you can see now, in the layout section, the flute part now becomes flute and piccolo. Dorico has this cool feature of preparing parts for multi-instrument, such as woodwind doublers or percussion players who have to switch between instruments. This is one setup feature I really appreciate. The only thing I find that is inconvenient is that the add instrument window closes once you pick an instrument. I would rather have it open until I finish adding my instruments. So just like Finale, keep adding instruments until I'm finished and then close the window. Although you can click on the add and sum, then just delete instruments that you don't need. You also get these buttons down here at the layout section where you can add a custom score or part. This is useful, for example, when you want to create a vocal score. So you just add an empty part, you select it, then click on the players or instrument you want to include in the part. So in this case, let's say it's a vocal and piano part. So now, this part right here includes the vocal and piano part. But you could actually add the staff names there if you want. Just click the staff layout, the layout options here. There are tons more feature in this setup that I still have to explore, but this shows how much I got going within the 30-day trial. Note input or any musical information you want in your music happens in the write mode, right here. So command 2, command 1 is setup, command 2 is write mode. The first thing that initially gets you to think is, where are the bars? Starting off without a time signature means that you can write freely without the constraints of meter. This is very useful for me when creating worksheets. So let's say I'm creating a lecture on scales. This free meter allows me to write continuously without the constraints of meter or bar line. Now, if I want to have measures, I simply start off by entering my meter. I click on the rest and use the popover for meter, which is Shift M. By the way, this is one of the features that got me into trying out Dorico. Popovers are shortcuts in inputting musical information, such as this one is a meter, so I'll probably add a meter. So now I have 4/4, or I could add tempo, key signature, playing techniques, bars, dynamics, and so on. It's a really fast way of placing markings, much like the meta tools in Finale. Now that we've set the meter to 4/4, we can now add measures by using again a popover for bar. So I'm just gonna click the empty measure and Shift B for bars, and let's say let's add 4 measures. So we now have 1 plus 4, so we have 5 measures. On the other hand, deleting measure stacks is not that obvious at first. If you notice on the top of the staff system, there's this grayed out bars with numbers. That's your system track here. This is where you can select a whole measure stack and delete it or add to it. So this is deleting a measure stack, or let's add a measure stack. So we were back to 5. You could also select a whole measure stack by clicking the system track. Now I have not tried any other input methods other than using a MIDI keyboard and my computer keyboard, so I will only focus on that bit. Before you can enter a note, you have to get into the note input mode, much like the speedy entry tool in Finale. To do that, you can double click on a measure, select a measure and then press return. or select a measure and Shift N. This will now show you the grid and the note input cursor. The grid is something very useful as it shows me where my mouse or cursor is in relation to the grid line. So my mouse is on the first beat, the end of the first beat, second beat, end of the second beat. Now you can adjust the grid density by going to this icon down here. So I could make it a 16th note. So if we could just zoom in there or zoom out. So let's go back to 8 notes. Now that we are in note input mode, just select your note duration and play on your MIDI keyboard. So I guess 8th note. An important thing about how Dorico interprets notes, in Finale, notes are inputted per character. Meaning, if you want to have a dotted quarter note sequence like this, you have to type in the quarter note, put a dot, put an 8th note tied to a quarter note. Both of them has the value equal to 3/8 notes. The first one is a dotted quarter note. The next one would be an 8th note tied to a quarter note. Dorico handles notes differently. When you click on the note duration on the left panel, any note you input at any part of the grid will have the same amount of duration. Since the value of that particular sequence in Finale is just 2 dotted quarter notes consecutively, just keep your note duration to a dotted quarter note and Dorico will write it out properly with the correct beat groupings. This is one of the things that I have to grasp in Dorico. It handles notes as durations, not as single characters. So even if I go beyond what can fit in one measure, Dorico simply carries over the complete duration of the note into the next measure. So for example, again, the dotted quarter note. Let's start here. And I keep on adding dotted quarter notes. It just carries over the note duration. Not like Finale, where this window pops out saying you have too many notes in a measure. Another example of how Dorico handles notes is this rhythmic sequence of dotted 8 notes. In Dorico, you just keep it locked to dotted 8 notes and just play the notes. Another good thing about working this way is you can move the notes without changing the duration. So let's say I made a mistake where the note should go. I just use the shortcut option left or right and move the note including its original duration. So let's say I made a mistake on this dotted 8th note value. I need this to be in beat 1, but instead I made a mistake and placed it on the last 16th note of the 4th beat. This moves by a 16th note, so I have to have my grid at 16. So I hold option and then right, and now that dotted 8th value moves by a 16th note. So I could actually move it around the measure and still maintain its full value. I can actually expand this. Let's say this is supposed to be 16th note going to a whole note in the next measure. You also have a shortcut to lengthen the note value. So it's option shift and right or left. So in this case, if I do option shift right, I increase the note value until I get to a whole note. Now, I could make it increase faster by having the grid with a bigger note value, and so on. At first, this was a confusing concept to me and kept on deleting notes that have the wrong duration, but after grasping that concept, for me it's actually a faster way to work. Adding dynamics is also a pleasure using pop-ups. Simply select the note, click on the dynamic popover shortcut, which is Shift D, and just type in the dynamic. So in this case, let's say I want 2 P's or 2 F's or where in Finale, you just use the meta tools to set your dynamics. The power of the popover lies when you want to add dynamics with crescendo markings. Select a series of notes that you want to have the crescendo and open the dynamics popover. Then you just type in your dynamics with the crescendo and Dorico writes it out perfectly. There's also a galley view where you can see your score continuously, much like a scroll view in Finale. Here you can see all instruments available. This means that the flute and piccolo will have separate staves in galley view, but will be shown in the part as an instrument change. So let's try adding random notes to the piccolo. So let's see what happens in the part. So as you can see, it starts off with flute, and then Dorico automatically places the instrument change marking, and then this is now on piccolo. This feature is extremely useful in percussion parts as you would have playback available for all the percussion instruments and it automatically shows the instrument changes. Other items like chords, slash notations, multiple voices, and others can be done in this mode. I do recommend the Dorico YouTube channel for all the information regarding specific notation features. The engrave mode of Dorico lets you edit how your score and parts look, and not just page size and layout. This is where you go to edit how chords look, placement of hairpins, and other formatting issues. The new thing for me here is the master pages. The master pages are your default layouts for the first page and succeeding pages. Now in Finale, I would create my templates ahead of a project, including titles, staff layouts, and margins. Again, master pages are better described in Dorico's YouTube channel, so check it out. Frames are used to contain the elements you want to appear in your page. It could be music in your flow, text, or graphics. This is one of the best features I've found as an educator. It is easier to create worksheets for students using frames in conjunction with flows. So let's say I would add 2 flows. Flow 2 will only contain violin 1. Flow 3 would contain only cello. Now let's add some notes in flow 3. And flow 2. So from there I go to engrave mode. Let's say I'd add a blank page. Add a music frame. So it says here this is a frame containing flow 3, but I could actually specify if I want just flow 2. And then I would write out text. Say this is exercise 1. Then I would write again add a text frame, size 2, then add another music frame that contains flow 3. So this is very, very useful as an educator. There's a video in the Dorico YouTube channel that shows you how to create worksheets. It helped me out when I was creating my first worksheet and lecture material for my students, so I do recommend that you check it out. While in engrave mode, you can also set note spacing, staff spacing, and system breaks. The play mode is one thing that I've yet to explore, as this is not present in Finale. The print mode is pretty self-explanatory, so I won't go through that in detail. Chords in Dorico behave differently. In Finale, you place chords on staves you want to have chords on. In Dorico, chords are automatically placed on rhythm section instruments. This means that you only need to type in or play the chords once and it automatically appears on rhythm section instruments. So I've added an electric guitar part, and I will now use the chord popover to add chords. You can actually set the appearance of the chord either on the top staff of a grand staff or the bottom staff. If you do want to have chords appear on instruments other than rhythm section instruments, there's this option in setup menu that shows the chords in a slash region. So for example, you want the flute to improvise and show the chords on the part. Just right click in setup mode, right click on the player, click show in chord symbol and slash region. Then go to write mode and create, let's say he would be improvising on measure 2. Add the slash region, and the chord will appear on the slash region only. Now speaking of slashes, this is probably the one thing that I would request to be streamlined. In Finale, the way to do slash notation is by using staff styles. Now if you have a combination of slash, rhythmic notation, and normal notation, you would just have to select which ones are slash without stems, slash with stems, and leave out the regular notation. Now in Dorico, it's a bit tricky, especially if you're used to Finale's way of doing it. Let's say I have to replicate that figure in Dorico. I've created here slashes with stems. Then I go to engrave mode. Select the notes that I want the stems to be hidden. Right click on this. Split the beam. Go back to write mode and add an LV tie. So that was a bit more steps than in Finale. So this is a workaround in Dorico for something that Finale can do really quick. So yeah, this is one thing that hopefully gets streamlined in the next versions. One cool thing though about slash regions is the automatic repeat counts. In Finale, let's say this is a drum set. After creating slashes, I would then create an expression writing out the counting. So in Dorico, you just highlight the measures, engage the repeat popover, type in slash, so you'll have the slash region, and Dorico automatically puts in the count frequency, which when I got the hang of it is a total time saver, especially when you're writing for rhythm section a lot. Collision handling is superb in Dorico compared to Finale. In Finale, after I write out an arrangement or orchestration, I have to spend a huge amount of time checking all parts and score for collisions. Dorico handles collisions intuitively to the point that after I write the music, the only thing I check in the score and parts are page turns and small details. This is another huge time saver for me. Overall, I plan to move my workflow to Dorico slowly but still keep Finale as a backup. Although at first it was really a pain learning things that I can do easily on Finale, then have to keep going to YouTube or the forums to learn how to do things. But after a good couple of hours practicing it, I finally grasped the new workflow Dorico offers. It is by no means perfect and in some cases slower than how I work things in Finale, but I have experienced firsthand how the Dorico team handles customer comments. Thank you to John Barron, who is a product specialist for Dorico, for the direct help he gave me during my first days in the trial. Thank you also to Daniel Spreadbury, Dorico's product manager, for the short Skype chat we had that showed me how fast Dorico is evolving and catching up to industry standards. That really got me excited on the future updates of Dorico. Anyway, my name is JC Magsalin, and that was a short overview of my 30-day trial experience with Dorico Pro.